The autumn wind howled through the bare branches of the cottonwood trees that stood sentinel over the Willowbrook Cemetery, carrying with it the promise of an early winter and the mournful sound of a world preparing for sleep. Samuel Carter had come to visit his wife's grave on what would have been their 10th wedding anniversary, carrying the small bouquet of wildflowers that had been Elizabeth's favorites. But as he approached the familiar headstone that read Elizabeth and Carter, beloved wife, 1851 to 1882, Samuel noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. Curled up between two weathered grave markers, barely visible in the gathering dusk, was a small figure wrapped in what appeared to be a threadbare blanket. Samuel set down his flowers and approached carefully, not wanting to startle what he assumed was a sleeping vagrant. But as he drew closer, his heart clenched with shock and compassion. It wasn't a grown person seeking shelter among the dead, it was a child, a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, sleeping fitfully in the cold October air. Her clothes were little more than rags, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely recognizable. Her dark hair was tangled and dirty, and her small face, even in sleep, bore the pinched look of someone who had known hunger far too intimately. But what struck Samuel most was the way she clutched a small, worn book to her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Child," Samuel said softly, kneeling beside her. "Child, wake up." The girl's eyes snapped open instantly, dark brown and filled with the wariness of someone much older than her years. She scrambled backward until her back hit a tombstone, the book still pressed protectively against her chest. "I wasn't doing nothing wrong, mister," she said quickly, her voice hoarse and small. "I'll move along if you want. Don't call the sheriff on me." Samuel raised his hands in a gesture of peace, his heart breaking at the fear in her young voice. "I'm not going to call anyone. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. It's getting cold out here." The girl studied his face in the dim light, as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. "I'm fine," she said, though her shivering betrayed her words. "I got a place to sleep." "In the cemetery?" Samuel asked gently. "It's quiet here. Nobody bothers you. The dead don't mind sharing." The matter-of-fact way she said it made Samuel's chest tighten with emotion. What kind of life had this child lived that sleeping among graves seemed like a reasonable option? "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked. The girl hesitated for a long moment before answering. Lucy May." "Well, Lucy May, I'm Samuel Carter, and I'm wondering when you last had a proper meal." At the mention of food, Lucy's eyes brightened slightly, but she quickly tried to hide her interest. "I eat just fine. Found some apples yesterday that weren't too wormy." Samuel noticed how she unconsciously pressed her hand to her stomach as she spoke. "Lucy, I know we just met, but I'd like to offer you something. I've got a ranch not far from here, and I was about to head home to a warm house and a hot dinner. Would you like to come with me, just for tonight, to get warm and get a good meal in you?" "Why?" Lucy asked suspiciously. "What do you want from me?" The directness of the question told Samuel that this child had learned to be cautious about adult motivations the hard way. "I don't want anything from you. I just can't bear the thought of leaving you out here in the cold when I have the means to help." Lucy studied his face for a long moment, and Samuel had the strange feeling that despite her young age, she was an excellent judge of character. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Just for tonight," she said, "and I keep my book with me, of course." Samuel agreed. "What book is it?" Lucy held up the worn volume, and Samuel could just make out the faded title, "A Collection of Children's Stories and Poems." "My mama gave it to me before she died," Lucy said quietly. "She taught me to read from it. It's all I got left of her." Samuel felt his throat tighten. "It must be very precious to you." "It is. Mama always said that reading was the one thing nobody could ever take away from you, no matter how poor you got." "Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was the best mama in the whole world," Lucy said with fierce loyalty. "She got sick last winter and died. Papa tried to take care of me, but he got sick too and died in the spring. I've been on my own since then." Samuel's heart ached for this brave little girl who had endured more loss in her short life than many adults ever faced. "I'm sorry, Lucy. That must have been very hard." Lucy shrugged with the practiced indifference of someone who had learned that showing too much emotion could be dangerous. People die, that's just how it is. But Samuel caught the slight tremor in her voice and knew that beneath the tough exterior was a grieving child who had been forced to grow up far too quickly. As they made their way through the cemetery towards Samuel's horse, Lucy suddenly stopped. "Walking, Mr. Carter," she said hesitantly, You ain't one of them men who hurt children, are you? Because I run real fast, and I got a knife." The question hit Samuel like a physical blow, not because he was offended, but because it revealed just how dangerous this child's world had become. "No, Lucy, I promise you, I would never hurt a child. I would never hurt you." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Samuel thought for a moment, then knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Because the woman buried back there in that cemetery was my wife, Elizabeth. She died 2 years ago, and I loved her more than anything in the world. She always wanted children, but we never had any. Elizabeth would have taken one look at you sleeping in the cold and would have insisted I bring you home. I'm not doing this for me, Lucy. I'm doing it for her and for you, because every child deserves to be safe and warm and fed." Lucy studied his face in the moonlight, and whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. "Okay, but just for tonight." "Just for tonight," Samuel agreed, though he was already wondering how he could possibly send this child back to sleeping in a graveyard come morning. The ride to Samuel's ranch was quiet, with Lucy sitting in front of him on his horse, still clutching her precious book. Samuel could feel how thin she was through her ragged clothes, and he made mental note to have his housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, prepare a substantial meal. As they approached the ranch house, a comfortable 2-story building with warm light spilling from the windows, Lucy's eyes widened with wonder. "You live here all by yourself?" she asked. "Mostly. Mrs. Henderson comes during the day to cook and clean, but she goes home to her own family in the evenings. It's the biggest house I ever seen," Lucy said with awe. Samuel realized that his modest ranch house, which had always seemed rather ordinary to him, must appear palatial to a child who had been sleeping in graveyards. Mrs. Henderson had left dinner warming on the stove, as she always did, and Samuel was grateful for her foresight as he watched Lucy's eyes widen at the sight of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. "All this is for one person?" Lucy asked in amazement. "All this is for us," Samuel corrected gently. "Mrs. Henderson always makes more than I can eat anyway." As Lucy ate, trying to maintain manners despite her obvious hunger, Samuel found himself studying her more carefully beneath the dirt and ragged clothes. She was a pretty child with intelligent eyes and a natural grace that spoke to good breeding. Her speech, while marked by the informality of frontier life, showed that someone had taken the time to teach her proper English. "Lucy," Samuel said as she finished her second helping of stew, "where have you been living since your parents died? Surely there was someone who could take you in." Lucy's expression grew guarded. "Papa didn't have no family left, and Mama's family lived back east somewhere. After Papa died, the man who owned our house said I had to leave cause I couldn't pay rent. I've been staying wherever I could find a place that was safe." "What about the orphanage in town?" Lucy's face darkened. "I tried there first, but Mrs. Grimsby, she runs it. She's mean. She hits the children and makes them work all day for just bread and water, and she sells the pretty girls to men who—" Lucy stopped, apparently not knowing how to explain something she sensed was wrong, but didn't fully understand. Samuel felt a cold rage building in his chest. He'd heard rumors about the mismanagement of the territorial orphanage, but he'd never imagined it was this bad. "So you decided the cemetery was safer," he said quietly. "Dead people don't hurt you," Lucy said simply, and it was quiet there. "Sometimes I'd read my book out loud to them. I figured they might get lonely too." The image of this small child reading stories to the dead nearly broke Samuel's heart. "Lucy, what if I said you didn't have to go back to the cemetery? What if I said you could stay here?" Lucy froze with a spoonful of pie halfway to her mouth. "Forever, if you wanted to. I know we don't know each other very well yet, but I have plenty of room, and I could use the company. You could have your own room, and Mrs. Henderson could help you with things like getting proper clothes and learning to be a young lady." "What would I have to do?" Lucy asked cautiously. Just be a child, Samuel said. Go to school when we get you enrolled, help around the house if you want to, read your books. Nothing more than any child should be expected to do. Lucy set down her spoon and stared at him with an expression that was heartbreakingly serious for such a young face. Mr. Carter, are you asking me to be your daughter? The directness of the question caught Samuel off guard, but as he looked at this brave, intelligent, lonely child, he realized that was exactly what he was asking. I suppose I am, he said. If you think you'd like that. Lucy was quiet for a long moment, and Samuel could see her working through the implications of his offer. Finally, she spoke. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that a lot. But Mr. Carter, Samuel, I ain't had a papa for a long time. I might not remember how to be a daughter, and I've never been a papa, Samuel replied. I might not remember how to be a father, but maybe we could figure it out together. Lucy smiled then, the first genuine smile Samuel had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. I'd like to try. As Samuel showed Lucy to what would become her room, Elizabeth's old sewing room, which had always felt empty, he found himself thinking about divine providence and second chances. He had come to the cemetery to mourn his lost love and had found something he never expected, the possibility of building a family with a child who needed him as much as he needed her. Samuel, Lucy called softly from the doorway as he prepared to leave her to rest. Yes, thank you. For everything. For not leaving me in the cold. Thank you, Samuel replied. For trusting me enough to come home with me. As he closed the door to Lucy's room and headed to his own chamber, Samuel felt something he hadn't experienced since Elizabeth's death. Hope for the future. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal proceedings to make the adoption official, enrolling Lucy in school, helping her adjust to a completely different life. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, his house didn't feel empty. Subscribe to our channel to see how Samuel and Lucy build their new family. Hit that notification bell for more heartwarming Western stories of love and second chances. Dawn came early to the Carter Ranch, bringing with it the golden light of a new day and the sound of Mrs. Henderson arriving for her daily duties. Samuel had awakened before sunrise, as was his custom, but instead of the familiar emptiness that usually greeted his mornings, he felt a sense of anticipation. Lucy was still sleeping when he checked on her, curled up in the large bed with her precious book beside her on the pillow. Mrs. Henderson's reaction to finding a child in the house was everything Samuel had expected from the kind-hearted widow who had been caring for his household since Elizabeth's death. Bless my soul, she exclaimed when Samuel explained the situation over coffee. That poor lamb, sleeping in the cemetery. What kind of world do we live in when children have nowhere safe to lay their heads? I was hoping you might help her with some proper clothes today, Samuel said. Everything she has is practically falling apart. Of course I will. I've got some fabric that would make lovely dresses for a girl her size, and she'll need shoes, undergarments, a warm coat. Mrs. Henderson was already making mental lists. She's a pretty little thing under all that dirt, isn't she? Very pretty and intelligent. She can read quite well for her age. Reading is good. Too many children these days grow up without letters. Mrs. Henderson paused, studying Samuel's face. Mr. Carter, are you thinking of keeping this child permanently? Samuel met her gaze directly. I'm thinking of adopting her, if she'll have me. I know it's sudden, but Martha, this house has felt like a tomb since Elizabeth died. Having Lucy here, it feels right. Double quotes. Mrs. Henderson smiled with obvious approval. Miss Elizabeth would have loved that child the moment she laid eyes on her. She always said this house was meant to be filled with children's laughter. Their conversation was interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs. Lucy appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her ragged clothes, but with her face washed and her hair neatly braided. She looked uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether the previous night had been real or just a wonderful dream. Good morning, Lucy, Samuel said warmly. How did you sleep? Like I was dead. Lucy replied honestly, then blushed at her choice of words. I mean, real good. That bed's softer than anything I ever felt. Lucy, I'd like you to meet Mrs. Henderson. She takes care of the house during the day. Mrs. Henderson approached Lucy with the gentle manner of someone experienced with children. "Hello. Dear, you're a tiny thing, aren't you? When did you last have a proper breakfast?" Lucy thought seriously about the question. "I reckon it was last spring, before Papa got sick." Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained cheerful. "Well, we'll just have to fix that right now. How do you feel about eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits with honey?" "I feel like that sounds like heaven," Lucy said with such earnestness that both adults had to smile. Over breakfast, Samuel began to learn more about Lucy's background. Her father had been a clerk in a mining office, and her mother had taken in sewing to help make ends meet. They had been respectable working people who had fallen victim to circumstances beyond their control. "Mama always said education was the most important thing," Lucy told them between bites of biscuit. "She made sure I could read and write and do sums, even when we didn't have much money for books." "That's very wise," Samuel said. "There's a school in town that I think you'd like. The teacher, Miss Patterson, is known for being kind to children." Lucy's expression grew worried. "School costs money, don't it?" "Don't you worry about money," Samuel said firmly. "That's my job now." After breakfast, Mrs. Henderson whisked Lucy away for what she diplomatically called getting you properly fitted out. Samuel used the time to ride into town to speak with Judge Morrison about the legal aspects of adoption. Judge Morrison was a practical man who had seen his share of unusual family situations. "On the frontier, you want to adopt this child you found in the cemetery?" he asked, reviewing the papers Samuel had described. "Yes, sir. She has no living relatives that she knows of, and the alternative is sending her back to living on the streets, or to an orphanage that, frankly, sounds more like a prison." "I've heard troubling reports about Mrs. Grimsby's operation," the judge admitted. "Very well, Mr. Carter. If the child consents and you're prepared to take full legal and financial responsibility for her welfare, I see no reason to delay the proceedings. Bring her in tomorrow and we'll make it official." Samuel's next stop was the general store, where he purchased more children's books, hair ribbons, candy, and a china doll he thought Lucy might like. As he made his purchases, he was aware of curious stares and whispered conversations among the other customers. "Is it true you're taking in that orphan girl?" asked Mrs. Patterson, the school teacher. "Yes, ma'am. I'm planning to adopt her legally." "Well, I think it's wonderful," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "Every child deserves a chance, and you're a good man to give her one. When you're ready to enroll her in school, just bring her by. I'll be happy to assess her educational level." But not all the reactions were positive. Samuel overheard Reverend Blackwood speaking to a group of church ladies near the fabric counter. "Mark my words, no good will come of this," the Reverend was saying. "A bachelor taking in a strange girl child, it's unseemly. Who knows what kind of influences she's been exposed to?" Living on the streets, Samuel felt his temper rise, but before he could respond, an unexpected voice cut through the chatter. "Reverend Blackwood," said Mrs. Morrison, the judge's wife, "I find your implications disgusting. Samuel Carter is one of the most decent men in this territory, and that child is fortunate to have found someone willing to care for her." The rebuke from such a respected woman effectively ended the gossip, but Samuel realized that he and Lucy would have to deal with social prejudice as they built their new family. When he returned to the ranch, he found a transformation that took his breath away. Lucy had been bathed, her hair properly washed and styled, and she was wearing a simple blue dress that Mrs. Henderson had quickly altered to fit her small frame. She looked like a completely different child, still thin, but clean and proper, and beautiful. "Do I look all right?" Lucy asked anxiously, twirling to show off the dress. "You look absolutely perfect," Samuel said, and meant it. "Lucy, I have something for you." He presented her with the packages from town, and Lucy's eyes widened with wonder as she unwrapped the books, the hair ribbons, and finally the china doll. "She's beautiful," Lucy whispered, cradling the doll carefully. "I ain't never had a doll before." "Every little girl should have a doll," Samuel said. "What will you name her?" Lucy thought seriously about this important decision. "Elizabeth," she said. "Finally, after your wife who would have liked me to be here." Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. I think that's a perfect name. The next few weeks established a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Lucy proved to be a bright, eager student who threw herself into her lessons with Miss Patterson and quickly caught up to children her own age academically. At home, she helped Mrs. Henderson with simple household tasks and spent her evenings reading or playing with her doll while Samuel worked on ranch business. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most to Samuel. Lucy curled up next to him while he read the newspaper aloud, her excited chatter about what she'd learned in school, the way she had taken to calling him Papa Sam with increasing confidence. Papa Sam, Lucy said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Are you sorry you found me in the cemetery? Sorry. Samuel was genuinely surprised by the question. Lucy, finding you was the best thing that's happened to me since Elizabeth died. Why would you ask that? Some of the kids at school, they say things about how I was living like a wild animal and you probably just felt sorry for me. Samuel set down his coffee and turned to face her fully. Lucy, listen to me very carefully. I didn't take you in because I felt sorry for you. I did feel sorry for your situation, but that's not why I asked you to stay. Then why? Because from the moment I saw you sleeping in that cemetery, clutching your book and trying to be brave even though you were scared and alone, I knew you were special. Because in these few weeks, you've brought more joy and laughter into this house than it's seen in years. Because you're smart and funny and kind, and any man would be proud to call you his daughter. Lucy smiled, but Samuel could see that the words of her schoolmates had hurt her. What if I turn out bad? What if I disappoint you? Lucy May Carter, Samuel said, using the full name they'd made official in Judge Morrison's court. You could never disappoint me. Do you know why? Why? Because you're already everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. You're brave. You survived months on your own when many adults couldn't have managed it. You're smart. Miss Patterson says you're one of the brightest students she's ever taught. You're kind. I've seen how gentle you are with the animals and how you help Mrs. Henderson without being asked. And most importantly, you have a good heart. How do you know I have a good heart? Because even when you were hungry and cold and afraid, you still read stories to the dead people in the cemetery because you thought they might be lonely. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. Lucy threw her arms around Samuel's neck, and he held her close, marveling at how the small person had become so important to him in such a short time. I love you, Papa Sam, she whispered. I love you too, Lucy, more than you'll ever know. As autumn turned to winter, their bond only grew stronger. Lucy thrived in school and at home, her natural resilience allowing her to adapt to her new life with remarkable grace. Samuel found himself looking forward to coming home each day, knowing that Lucy would be there with stories about her day and questions about everything, from ranch operations to the stars in the sky. The first real test of their new family came in December, when Lucy developed a fever that left her weak and frightened. Samuel sat by her bedside for 3 days, reading to her from her beloved book of stories and doing everything he could to bring her temperature down. Am I going to die, like Mama and Papa? Lucy asked during one of her more lucid moments. No, Samuel said firmly. I'm not going to let that happen. You're going to get better, and then we're going to celebrate Christmas together. I've already ordered your present from back east. What is it? It's a surprise, but I think you'll like it. Lucy did recover, just as Samuel had promised, and Christmas morning found her squealing with delight over the complete set of children's classics he'd ordered from a bookstore in Denver. But her gift to him was even more precious, a small drawing she'd made of the two of them, standing in front of the ranch house, with my Papa Sam and me written carefully at the bottom. Do you like it? Lucy asked anxiously. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Samuel said, and he meant it. The drawing would hang in his study for the rest of his life, a reminder of the day a lonely man and an orphaned child became a family. Don't miss the challenges ahead for Samuel and Lucy. Subscribe to see how their bond grows stronger through trials and triumphs. Spring arrived at the Carter Ranch with an explosion of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings, but it also brought unexpected challenges that would test the strength of the family Samuel and Lucy had built together. Lucy had been living with Samuel for 6 months, and both had settled into a comfortable routine that felt as natural as if they'd been together all their lives. "Papa Sam," Lucy said one morning over breakfast, "Miss Patterson says there's going to be a school exhibition next month where all the students show what they've learned. Can you come watch me recite poetry? I wouldn't miss it for the world." Samuel replied, his pride in Lucy's academic achievements evident in his voice. "Which poem are you going to recite?" "I'm learning the children's are by Mr. Longfellow. It's about a father who loves his daughters very much." Samuel felt his heart swell with emotion. "That sounds perfect." Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor, a stern-looking woman in dark clothing, who introduced herself as Mrs. Agatha Thornton from the Territorial Child Welfare Board. "Mr. Carter," she said without preamble, "I'm here to conduct an inspection regarding the welfare of the minor child Lucy May Carter, currently in your custody." Samuel felt a chill of apprehension. "An inspection? On whose authority?" "We've received complaints suggesting that this adoption was irregular and that the child may not be receiving proper care." Mrs. Thornton's cold eyes swept over Lucy, who had instinctively moved closer to Samuel. "I'm here to determine whether this arrangement is in the child's best interests." "What kind of complaints?" Samuel demanded. "Concerns about a single man raising a young girl without proper female supervision. Questions about the child's moral education and social development. Suggestions that she might be better served in a proper institutional setting." Samuel realized immediately what was happening. The gossip and prejudice they'd encountered in town had escalated into an official challenge to their family. "Mrs. Thornton," Samuel said, keeping his voice calm despite his anger, "Lucy is my legally adopted daughter. Judge Morrison approved the adoption after thorough consideration. She's thriving in school. She's healthy and happy, and she's receiving excellent care." "That remains to be determined," Mrs. Thornton replied coldly. "I'll need to interview the child privately and inspect the living conditions. Lucy, dear, come with me." Lucy pressed closer to Samuel, her dark eyes wide with fear. "I don't want to go with her." "Papa Sam." "It's all right," Samuel said gently, though his own heart was racing. "Mrs. Thornton just wants to ask you some questions. Tell her the truth about how you're being treated here." The interview lasted over an hour, during which Samuel paced the porch like a caged animal. When Mrs. Thornton finally emerged with Lucy, the child's face was tear-stained, and she immediately ran to Samuel's arms. "What did you ask her?" Samuel demanded. "Standard questions about her living conditions, education, and treatment." Mrs. Thornton's expression was unreadable. "I'll also need to speak with your housekeeper and examine the child's sleeping quarters." Mrs. Henderson, when interviewed, was a fierce advocate for both Samuel and Lucy. "That man has given that child everything she could ever need," she declared. "Love, security, education, proper care. I've never seen a father more devoted to his daughter's welfare." But Samuel could see that Mrs. Thornton remained skeptical. After completing her inspection, she delivered news that made his blood run cold. "Mr. Carter, based on my preliminary findings, I have concerns about this arrangement. The child will remain in your custody temporarily, but I'm recommending a thorough review by the Territorial Board. There's a possibility that she may need to be transferred to a more appropriate institutional setting." "You mean the orphanage," Samuel said flatly. "The Willowbrook Children's Home provides structured care with proper moral guidance and female supervision." Samuel wanted to tell this woman exactly what he thought of Mrs. Grimsby's children's home, but he knew that losing his temper would only hurt Lucy's case. After Mrs. Thornton left, Samuel found Lucy in her room, clutching her doll Elizabeth and her book of stories. "Are they going to take me away, Papa Sam?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Samuel sat on the bed beside her and pulled her into his arms. "Not if I can help it. Lucy, no matter what happens, I want you to remember that you are my daughter in every way that matters. Nothing anyone says or does can change that. But what if they make me go to the orphanage? Then I'll fight them with everything I have. And if that doesn't work, I'll find another way to get you back. I promise you, Lucy, I will never stop fighting for you." The hearing was scheduled for the following month. and Samuel spent every available moment preparing his case. He gathered testimonials from Miss Patterson about Lucy's academic progress, from Dr. Williams about her improved health, and from various community members who had witnessed their strong bond. Judge Morrison, while sympathetic, explained the challenges they faced. Samuel, legally your adoption is sound, but the territorial board has significant influence, and if they determine that Lucy would be better served elsewhere, she won't be better served elsewhere. Samuel said firmly, that orphanage is a hellhole, and we both know it. I agree with you. But proving that and proving that you're providing superior care are two different things. The week before the hearing, Lucy came home from school with disturbing news. Papa Sam, some of the kids at school are saying mean things. They're saying I'm going to be taken away because you're not a fit father. Samuel felt his protective anger flare. Lucy, those children don't know what they're talking about. They're just repeating gossip they've heard from adults who should know better. But what if they're right? What if I'm not supposed to be here? Samuel knelt down to Lucy's eye level, taking her small hands in his. Lucy May Carter, listen to me very carefully. You belong here. You belong with me, not because of what any judge or board says, but because we chose each other. We're family, and family doesn't give up on each other, even if they make me leave. Even then, if they take you away, I'll visit you every day they'll let me. I'll write you letters. I'll send you books, and I'll keep fighting to bring you home, because this will always be your home, no matter where they make you live. The hearing took place in the territorial courthouse, with Mrs. Thornton presenting her case for removing Lucy from Samuel's care. Her arguments focused on the impropriety of a single man raising a young girl and the superior structure of institutional care. The child has been living without proper female guidance, Mrs. Thornton argued. While Mr. Carter may mean well, he cannot provide the moral instruction and social training that a young lady requires. Samuel's lawyer, William Harrison, countered with evidence of Lucy's remarkable progress and the strength of their family bond. Miss Patterson testified about Lucy's academic achievements and her obvious happiness. Mrs. Henderson spoke passionately about the loving home Samuel had created. But it was Lucy herself who provided the most powerful testimony. When asked by the judge about her preferences, she stood up with quiet dignity and spoke in a clear, strong voice. Your Honor, before Papa Sam found me, I was sleeping in a graveyard because I had nowhere else to go. I was hungry and cold and scared all the time. But Papa Sam didn't just give me food and a warm bed. He gave me love. He reads to me every night. He helps me with my schoolwork. He listens to my dreams and fears. He makes me feel safe and wanted and important. Lucy paused, looking directly at Mrs. Thornton. Mrs. Thornton says I need proper female guidance, but Mrs. Henderson has been teaching me everything a lady needs to know. She says I need moral instruction, but Papa Sam has taught me to be honest and kind and brave. She says the orphanage would be better for me, but Papa Sam found me sleeping with dead people rather than go to that place. That should tell you something. The courtroom was completely silent as Lucy continued. I know some people think it's wrong for a man to raise a girl by himself, but Papa Sam isn't just any man. He's my father. Not because he had to be, but because he chose to be, and I choose to be his daughter. We're a family, and families are supposed to stay together. Judge Morrison deliberated for less than 10 minutes before delivering his verdict. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence, this court finds that Lucy May Carter is receiving excellent care in the custody of her adoptive father, Samuel Carter. The adoption stands, and the child will remain in Mr. Carter's custody. Furthermore, this court finds no evidence to support the concerns raised by the Territorial Child Welfare Board. The relief that flooded through Samuel was overwhelming. Lucy ran to him, and he swept her up in his arms, holding her tight as tears of joy streamed down both their faces. We won, Papa Sam, Lucy whispered. We get to stay together, forever, Samuel promised. We're family forever. As they left the courthouse together, Samuel reflected on how much their lives had changed since that autumn evening, when he'd found a scared little girl sleeping among the graves. Lucy had given him purpose, joy, and love he'd thought he'd lost. Forever, in return, He'd given her security, education, and the chance to grow into the remarkable young woman he knew she would become. "Papa Sam," Lucy said as they drove home in their wagon, "do you think Mama Elizabeth would have liked me?" "Oh, sweetheart," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "She would have loved you just as much as I do, and I think she'd be proud of the strong, brave young lady you're becoming. Do you think she sent you to find me that night?" Samuel considered the question seriously. "You know what? I think maybe she did. I think she knew we needed each other." As they crested the hill that brought their ranch into view, Lucy snuggled closer to Samuel's side. "Papa Sam, yes, thank you for taking me home from the graveyard." "Thank you," Samuel replied, "for making this house a home again." In the distance, the lights of their ranch house beckoned warmly, promising another evening of quiet companionship, bedtime stories, and the simple joy of being a family. And Samuel knew that no matter what challenges the future might bring, he and Lucy would face them together, father and daughter, bound not by blood but by choice, love, and the unbreakable bonds of the heart. Years later, when Lucy graduated as valedictorian from the Territorial High School, when she married a kind young man who adored her intelligence and spirit, when she gave Samuel his first grandchild through all of life's milestones, they would remember that cold autumn night in the cemetery where a lonely man and an orphaned child found each other and discovered that families are made not by circumstance, but by love. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, they would walk together through the Willowbrook Cemetery, not as strangers seeking shelter among the dead, but as father and daughter paying respects to Elizabeth Carter, the woman whose memory had brought them together and whose love had made their family possible. Thank you for following Samuel and Lucy's incredible journey from a graveyard encounter to a forever family. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming Western stories that celebrate the power of love, choice, and second chances in building the families that matter most.